Start by removing the 2 saddle bolts and barrel nuts. Remove the valve cap. Use parallel jaw wrench pliers to hold the lower cradle. An adjustable wrench or open-end wrench may be used, but may leave marks on the flats of the cradle. Use the triple square socket and a 3/8 inch breaker bar to loosen and remove the lock ring. Remove the lower cradle assembly from the stanchion. Slide the stanchion down, being careful not to lose the upper O-ring on the rod end cap. Hold the top of the piston rod with a 7mm open-end wrench. Use a 13mm cone wrench to loosen and remove the rod end cap. Use internal snap ring pliers to remove the retaining ring at the bottom of the post. Use a pick to unseat and remove the plastic air filter retainer. Reinstall the valve cap on the end of the piston rod. Push the valve cap against the bench surface to unseat the cartridge from the housing. Remove the valve cap and slide the cartridge out of the housing. Slide the stanchion out of the lower tube of the housing. Use a pick to unseat the brass anti-rotational pins from their grooves. Remove the split bushing from the bottom of the stanchion. Remove the wiper seal from the lower tube. Clean all of the housing components using isopropyl alcohol and a clean towel. The pins, wiper seal, and split bushing may be reused if no damage or excessive wear is found during inspection. Replace these components if any damage is found. Install the wiper seal into the top of the lower tube. Make sure the seal is fully seated in the gland and that the coil spring is in place. Apply a light coat of grease to the inside of the wiper seal and upper bushing. Apply a liberal amount of grease to the pin channels at the bottom of the lower tube. Install the split bushing onto the end of the stanchion. Place a small dab of grease onto each of the 4 pin grooves on the stanchion. Place the pins into the grooves. The grease will help to hold the pins in place during installation. Slide the stanchion into the lower tube. Pay attention to the orientation of the stanchion. The 2 flats at the top of the stanchion should be on the left and right sides of the housing. The laser marked graphics are on the back side of the lower tube. Cycle the housing a few times through its full length of travel to distribute the grease. Check for any binding or excessive rotational play. If any roughness or binding is felt, recheck that the lower tube is free of any dirt contamination and that the wiper seal, bushings, and pins are all sufficiently greased. If excessive rotational play is felt between the stanchion and lower tube, replace the anti-rotational pins. Note that a small amount of rotational play on an uninstalled dropper post is normal and expected. Insert the cartridge through the bottom of the housing. Push firmly on the actuator to seat the cartridge into place. Install the plastic air filter retainer. Use a pick or small screwdriver to ensure that the retainer is fully seated into place. Make sure that the ends of the retainer do not overlap. Use internal snap ring pliers to install the retaining ring. Make sure that the retaining ring is fully seated into its groove. Thread the rod end cap assembly onto the piston rod. Use a 7mm open end wrench and a 13mm cone wrench to tighten. Slide the stanchion up until the rod end cap is seated. Place the top O-ring into position on the rod end cap. Place the lower cradle assembly onto the top of the stanchion. Note the laser marked R on the right saddle pivot block indicating the correct orientation. Lightly grease the threads of the lock ring. Install the lock ring to secure the lower cradle. Tightly grip the two flats of the lower cradle using wrench pliers. Use a 3/8 drive torque wrench and a wolf tooth triple square socket to tighten the lock ring to the specified torque. Reinstall the air cap, upper cradle, and two saddle bolts and barrel nuts. Perform a bench test by manually opening the valve and fully compressing the post, holding the post in a vertical orientation. Wait a few seconds and manually actuate the valve to extend the post. Push on the top of the post to check for any squish. If any squish is felt, repeat this step. The post will automatically bleed any air out of the cylinder when it is fully compressed, as long as it is in an upright position. Clean any residual grease or oil using isopropyl alcohol and a clean towel.